right. Welcome back to the Built to Grow podcast. I'm your host, Tim Lyons, joined in studio for episode 7,426. Randy Angston, what's up, buddy?
I think we're ahead of the average. We're ahead of the curve right here.
Yeah, ahead of the curve, guys. Got a lot of stuff to talk about, but we're going to talk about how rotisserie chicken could save the fitness industry.
Yeah, there you go. Take a bite out of this episode.
All right, guys. So I was doing some research for, for a presentation, be hosting here in a little bit. By the way, Grow Summit, guys, Nashville, it's right around the corner, guys. It's going to come up quick. I think we're like 50%.
60, so yeah.
60% sold to the room already. So that's awesome. But irrespective of that, when we are in our gyms, right, we think sometimes that more is better.
Yes.
We sometimes believe that if we could train athletes and then have, an old person class, like an active adult, and then we could, have the mom class and then this thing and the training for athletes, but also training for a general population, that we could serve everybody.
Sure.
And we kind of sometimes bend our services. And guys, by the way, we did this way back because we needed to take on clients. We would create things to take on clients that really weren't in our wheelhouse.
Yeah.
We would take on, we were training pro golfers at some time, we were just taking anybody because we know we could help them.
Sure.
But it really wasn't the best training for them or for us or for the business itself.
Or it would break systems of the delivery for the main thing, sure.
Right. And so we all believe we have one main thing, and some people believe they have 5 main things. And here at this particular gym, my store, you've heard us talk about the data that kind of the epiphany that I had when I started looking at what's driving the business, what type of clients, what membership are they on. And we found that semi-private was by far and away blowing out the rest of the services that we had, because we had team training, but we also had this active adult one, and then we had some athlete training, we were doing some session packs, but it was 90% of our revenue was coming from semi-private training. And then we started looking at why, who are the clients, all these things. And the data drove me to make a decision to say, get rid of everything else but this one thing. And that's when we scaled. That's when we perfected it. That's when we were able to focus on the delivery system, the customer experience, and that's where Semi-Private Pro came. All these innovations in the gym remodel, all these innovations came from focusing on the thing, the main thing we do. And since then we kind of have a little stretch therapy and we do some nutrition, but it's not distracting us from the main thing. And that's really where it gets a little tricky for gyms. It's is it distracting you from really being the best in class in this thing? And so a lot of times we go over here as a gym and we have all of these things that are doing mediocre at best, some that are just on the schedule and you have nobody in there and you're not willing to cut them. Well, the story that I'm about to share, it was a little bit of the opposite. Mm-hmm. They had a main thing. So the story is about Boston chicken. It's a rotisserie chicken. You guys may or may not know this story, but it's a pretty incredible story. And it's case in point. Yeah. The main thing, right, was driving the business. And so in the 1985, this company was founded out of Boston. It was the Rotisserie Chicken. It was it was first to market, right? Nobody was doing rotisserie chickens. It wasn't in the grocery stores. It was a healthier alternative to, say, fried chicken. It's delicious too. If we're being honest, I really enjoy rotisserie chicken.
I eat a ton of them.
So Boston Rotisserie Chicken was the name on the sign. It was outside the door, and they exploded. They were only thing they served was rotisserie chicken. Okay, that was it. That was their only menu item, and people went there for that. Mm-hmm. And it's really kind of cool because if there was a Boston rotisserie chicken place, I'd probably go to it right now if that's all they served.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you have a craving for a little rotisserie chicken. You don't want to go to Costco.
Costco gives my money. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I don't want to go to Costco right now. Yeah. I just want to go and sit down and then leave, right? Yep. So this company blew up, right? Between 1985 and 1995, they exponentially grew. They had 1,100 locations. They had $1 billion valuation in 1995, which we've calculated to be $2.05 million in today's money. Yeah. Billion. $2.05 billion. had a valuation in the billions of dollars. They had one item. They were going hard and fast on rotisserie chicken. It was on their name. They ran the show. Well, the CEO at the time was looking for growth. They just had IPO'd in 93. And as with a lot of these reasons, this happens in IPO, which is initial public offering. They are now a public company. They are beholden to stockholders.
Yep.
They're beholden to the investors of such, stock and the board, and they couldn't make the calls anymore. And so he was driven into this, hey, you need to optimize, you need to grow revenues.
In a way.
You need to grow revenues. And at their height, after their IPO and after all the pressure, they were opening a store a day.
Wow.
One store a day. And they were going like gangbusters. And they did continue to grow a little bit after the IPO, but then something happened. The CEO was pressured into optimizing the menu, adding turkey, adding ham, meatloaf, plus the chicken.
Sure.
The name got changed to Boston Market. And over the next 3 years in business, Boston Market tanked into bankruptcy, into a minus $700 million in debt, because they were taking out debt to open stores, and they were slowly cannibalizing their customer base by confusing the market of what they are and who they are. When they came for the chicken, and now there's some turkey going on, there's some ham, they're just not as good at any one thing.
Master of none at that point.
The inefficiencies in the kitchen, they couldn't pull the orders together fast enough, and they lost their customer base in a matter of 3 years into bankruptcy. And the lesson of the story is when they have too many products, when they have too many things, when they already had a proven model and they went and ruined it.
Yeah.
Because of maybe pressure from the investors and pressure from this, but they added too many things to their menu, and it collapsed their business.
Confused the marketplace too.
And then in mid 2000s, they were sold for parts to McDonald's. They no longer exist. From my knowledge.
I was just trying to think the last one I saw.
There was one over here. It's gone, been gone for years, but it was sold for parts for the kitchens and the locations. The McDonald's wanted the locations, and then they further on sold that. They sold for $177 million. Barely touched their debt. They killed themselves by just spreading out too thin across all of these things. And it's like gyms do this, but usually it's backwards. We put out everything in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
We're constantly adding things to the service offering in the beginning. And then when we get mature enough, we take things away and say, this is the driver.
Yeah.
The really smart gyms start with the knowledge that we have created for them and shared on the show. And they start like a TJ and Jess, where they start with the perfect model, and they exponentially grow from day one, versus staggering and plateauing at some point and then looking at the business and having to cut things to make it optimized. And so literally that's the story. And I think it's a great story and very relevant in this industry, because what happens a lot of times in gyms is the main thing isn't driving enough revenue. And maybe it's because it's not a great product to begin with. Maybe it's your market. Maybe it's your price. Maybe it's competition. But your product isn't generating enough revenue to keep the doors open. So therefore you feel like you have to grasp at the next shiny object that the guru says that you should run. And then you're forced into bending your own systems and operations to deliver the product that the guru said you should do, because that's the only way you can support yourself. And it's just this horrible cycle of going down the drain real quick. And you can end up being like Boston Chicken, Boston Market, and going down and then basically disappearing off the face of the earth.
How many times does a gym owner ask the clients, you know what I mean? What do you guys want out of here? If we could bring something in, what would you guys like to see? Well, they're not running your business. Yeah. They're there for a different reason, and they're already there for the one thing
that they came for,
right? So their opinion is a little skewed. And of course, if we give them the option and we aren't charging them necessarily for it, or they don't see that part of it yet, they're going to throw out ideas that it doesn't mean it's a great business decision. And I think you said it right. I think distraction is the problem, right? I look at the services in the gym kind of like juggling, right? You can only juggle, like your average person could probably juggle 3 balls like your normal juggle, a few reps. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. Right. But then throw a 4th ball in there, throw a 5th ball in there, and like, how many people can still continue to juggle with one more thing added, right? Yeah. And business can be a lot like that. You start dropping the ball literally in one of these areas. Well, it's bandwidth, it's attention, it's focus, all of these things that have to go across all of these different service offerings. The whole conversation is the jack of all trades, the master of none. And I think people forget about that, right? The jack of all trades seems like the utility player, seems like they can, the trainer can handle it all. I can do any type of training. Yeah. All right, well, are you an expert in any one of those arenas? That's where you need to double down.
I could tell you how good it feels to be able to say, we don't serve you. Not we don't serve you, but like we're not an expert in serving you. I think we should outsource this particular client to another place because you're so confident in what you do offer. If somebody wants one-on-one training here, we can't help them.
Yeah.
That's not what we do. We don't believe in it as a business. We believe, yes, you can get great results in one-on-one training. Obviously, you're getting super focused, but like for the business, it doesn't work for us. And we turn people away all the time. And that, and they ask us, hey, can I pay a little extra and just get the one? I'm sorry, we're not able to do that. And I've had a business coach tell me like, hey, you need to find a way to take those clients because you're losing a piece of the market. But sure, we could make more money, but at what expense? It would probably net zero at some point, and it would break a lot of the other things. It would cannibalize the delivery of our main thing, which is semi-private. So like, yes, while I agree, we are not able to serve a piece of the market, which technically is like the smallest piece, but they are the most wealthy. Sure. They would spend the most. And so like a little bit of me is like, man, we've got to find a way, but I already know the answers don't do that because our main thing's here.
Yeah, and it goes back to like the podcast we did where you're talking about like the phases of business, right? Right now you're in optimization. We figured out a lot of the structure, the model, where you want to be delivering to the marketplace and things like that. Throwing more into the situation now is not usually the answer. No. It's about, how many different things have we pulled back or removed from the business and it got really clear. It got better.
It's easier to run. There's times I sit back and I'm like, man, what else can we optimize? And sure, I could probably dig to find something, but we're there. Yeah. We're missing the boat on a few things, but it's not like catastrophic.
It's not it's not affecting the ability to keep the lights on. It's not affecting the ability to continue to progress.
And then the question becomes like, I was talking to a gym owner last night, and he's got, he's doing 120 a month in revenue out of a 7,000 square feet. It's a great model. And we were talking like, he's not in the gym. He's, he's got a great team. He was gone with his family and it came back, it grew. And I'm like, well, here's the question. Like, what else can you squeeze out of this thing that's really going to move the needle enough to be like, squeeze that an extra 1%. Like, is that worth your time and effort? Because there's going to be a point in time where like, this is good enough, or this is all we can get to in this model without like exponentially having to work harder or expansion, or really fund it in a way where it's like, yeah, we can grow, but the expense is net zero. It's like, you have to be okay. And really, without getting too long-winded here, we had a great speaker come speak to us, the founder of Priceline, Jeff Hoffman. He was at our Iron Circle event in Florida, and he was telling us about his buddy that was just so rich, and he was buying huge yachts and boats, and like he was sitting on the boat with this guy who was just like super competitive. He wants to be the best, the biggest on everything. And, I had billions of dollars, and he was like, I got the biggest boat here. And then Jeff was like, well, what happens when the next biggest boat comes?
Yeah. You're in the shadow of that boat, right?
You're in the shadow of this, of Bezos' boat. Like what then? When are you going to be happy with the size of the boat you got?
How big of a boat do you really want?
And so like, I think that really hits home for a lot of people. It's because you can work until you're dead and never achieve any, you're never fulfilled because your goalpost moves all the time. And while I believe that you absolutely should move the goalpost. When you hit a goal, like, okay, now what?
Sure.
But there's going to come a point in time, and maybe it's when you're 59 years old or 64 years old, and you're going to be like, I lost a decade of time chasing this thing that I'll never get because I thought that's what I wanted. But really, if I were to go back 10 years ago and be happy there, that would have been the best I would ever been. And it's just like this arc of like, when do you sell your company? You always want to sell your company at the top, but you don't know the next year going to be lower than that. You think you're going to be higher, so you're going to get more and more and more. But there is a peak of everything. There's a peak strength, peak attractiveness. I still haven't hit it yet. I'm still working. But there's a peak athleticism. There's a peak of business. There's a peak in Boston market of $1 billion valuation. There's a peak somewhere, in you just never know unless you have a magic crystal ball, which is impossible. Like, you just don't know where the peak is, and you want to exit at that point, but you have to be okay selling maybe a little bit lower or exiting or being happy with what you have, even though somebody else buys it and ticks it up 3 or 4 or 8%, because you never know what's going to happen on the other side.
I had the conversation I was talking with my dad about real estate, right? And he was talking about the last house that they sold, and he's like, man, like, in hindsight, we probably could have got a ton more money for it. I was like, yeah, but what would that have cost you, right? How long would that have been on the market, maybe, to find that next buyer, right? Like, so there's always, like, and nothing is gained without something given, right? There's always some exchange for that added value. It was probably time, right? You have a smaller market, less people that can afford that next thing. It's probably going to stretch out that sale. Yeah. At that time, like, what was more important for them? And just in that situation, my brother and I were out here. Both of us have young babies. Like, it was getting out to the family that was the priority, not 25,000 more, in the sale of a home or something, right? Sure. So it's looking at the whole thing, and you're talking about the bandwidth, right? What are you willing to sacrifice in order to get that additional revenue? And as I talk to more and more gym owners, it's becoming really clear. I mean, the industry's tough. It's hard to make, a great living with a single location, with the margins and the net profit and things like that. When you're sitting there and you're deciding, hey, do I bring this in, or do I do this? Do I run this harder to make a little bit more money? Gym owners quite often don't think about what it's going to do for their lifestyle, for their time, their energy and effort, just to get that to that next spot, when you could be working yourself into misery just to have a little bit more money on the P&L at the end of the year.
You could. So I think the takeaway here is that you have the goal that you want to hit. A friend of ours, Russell Brunson, he was telling me in our group or whatever that, he has a very specific goal, and when he hits it, he's done. Yeah, because he will keep running and running. He didn't share what that goal was. I think I know what it is, but it's like good. I mean, to achieve what he's talking about, it's like astronomical anyway. So, like, how can you not be happy with that? But like, anywhere in between here and there, he could hit that, and then the goalpost moves again. Sure. So just got to be heads up. So like, look, we got a little bit on a tangent. It was really about the main thing and making it the best in class, best in market, Boston market, best in market. Be that rotisserie chicken, because people came from far and wide to get that chicken from that place. Not, was it good? I don't remember this place. Like, I don't know. Like,
I don't remember. That's the funny thing is, I remember Boston Market.
I mean, it was good enough to have 1,100 locations, open up one a day, and freaking being $1 billion company, which is $2 billion today. Like, it was probably massive. Damn good. It's probably damn good. So, take that lesson and kind of apply it to your business, and hopefully that you see, like, hey, there probably is one thing that we're pretty good at. We should just go all in on it. And most likely, if you're following anything we're doing, it's probably semi-private training, but it could be you're the best in class at group training, whatever it is. Hopefully that helps you guys. That's it for this episode. Until next time, keep changing lives. We'll see you on the next show. Bye. All right. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Built to Grow podcast. If you want more help growing your business, join our free Facebook group, Profit Accelerator, helping training gyms grow to $30,000 a month and beyond. We'd love to see you there. Go check out the show notes for the link and keep building something great. And we'll see you in the next episode.